Hey everybody, so before we start our next part of the journey of playing through all of the Legend of Zelda games, I felt it was time, as I said a few weeks ago, to go ahead and do an updated hybrid official fan fiction timeline for the series. I'm going to try to avoid referencing versions 1 and 2 of this timeline and just focus on this updated version. If anybody's curious to see how the timeline's evolved over the time since I started doing the Zelda games, versions 1 and 2 are still up on the channel. Yeah, so I will try to keep this a little more brief than the last two videos, but I make no promises, because once I start ranting and raving about this timeline, it's difficult to stop. Alright, so let's see here. Let me get my cheat sheet up on the other screen. Alright, so I don't really have to go over this part too much because we've been through these games anyway. You know, we started at the beginning with The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which included the prehistory of, you know, the world being under siege by the Demon King Demise. And we know how that ended. We stopped Demise's revival. Well, no, excuse me, that's my first mistake already. We did not stop Demise's revival. Girahim was able to revive him, and we killed him. And then he did that little hate curse on us that says that an incarnation of him will haunt Zelda and Link wherever they go, for all time. Now, that curse did not go into effect right away, because, you know, we got through the Minish Cap, which was dealing with Vadi and him trying to steal the power of the royal family power. And then we went on to Four Swords, which was, again, still dealing with Vadi. But then after some rather bloody parts of Hyrule's history, we eventually came to the events of Ocarina of Time, where Demise was reborn in the form of the Gerudo King Ganondorf. But again, we've already been through Ocarina of Time, so, you know, we know what happened there. We were able to stop Ganondorf and seal his ass in the Sacred Realm. And then here's where we have the infamous timeline split. So, just like, I know I said I wouldn't reference it, but so in the original version of this timeline that I did, it was based off the timeline published in the Hyrule Historia book, and it had the child timeline, the adult timeline, and then the fallen timeline. Now, in retrospect, because of the way I blend the timelines together later on down this table here, I could have left it as the timeline where Link falls, but I saw this, and I've mentioned this before, I saw this video someone did suggesting that the fallen timeline is actually, it makes more sense for it to be the abandoned timeline. And what that means to me, the way I interpreted it, is when Link is, after the ending of Ocarina of Time, after Zelda sends Link back to relive his childhood the way he was supposed to, time moves on, which eventually leads into the Wind Waker. But this theory had the idea that Zelda sends Link back to the point where he drew the Master Sword. But because Link traveled back and forth through time, that created extra splits in the timeline. Almost like, the way I picture it actually now is the way the timeline stream looked in, like, the Loki series, the Marvel Loki series. You've got your main timeline, and then you have all these branches that keep coming off. So let's say the abandoned timeline is one of those branches that was due to the time travel and, you know, history changing and all that. The abandoned timeline is where things go very badly, and then that leads into the events of A Link to the Past. I'm trying to keep this a little, I'm intentionally keeping the lore of this vague, because I'm probably just gonna try to cover like the lore in between games as we go from now on, just because even with this timeline, everything is still subject to change based on new games that come out, or if I play through one of these unofficial beta projects, wink wink, ROM hacks, and decide that something I put in this timeline makes absolutely zero sense and have to re-fan fiction it, I have the opportunity to do that. But so we started down the child timeline first, which is where Link returns to the moment where he pulled the Master Sword. And that took us into the first of several unofficial beta projects, which was Legend of Zelda: The Missing Link, which was a short little game where we returned to the Kokiri Forest to find out that some fairy-eating monstrosity ransacked the village and, ate a bunch of fairies. And, we traveled around the overworld to some new areas beyond the Lost Woods and did the one dungeon in the game. So the whole thing with that was Link was looking for Navi, because Navi did leave at the end of Ocarina of Time. So Link was searching for Navi, found out about this creature. Soraya met with a very ill fate trying to hold back the fairy-eating monstrosity asshole. And the way Missing Link was made, it was actually, to me, perfection, because you fight the final boss. If you've watched Missing Link, you already know this. You fight the final boss, and the ending cutscene literally goes into where Majora's Mask started. And as we know, or should know by this point, because I've already played this game on the channel as well, Majora's Mask is Link's journey into the land of Termina, where we had to stop the little punk-ass skull kid that was corrupted by Majora's Mask from driving the moon into the planet's surface, which of course we did. So then we came to The Legend of Zelda: Voyager of Time, the last game that we did, which is again another one of those unofficial beta projects, ROM hack. So the thing with Voyager of Time is, per the in-game lore, we had another adventure in between Majora's Mask and Voyager of Time where we did return to the land of Termina, and Tail, the purple fairy, ended up going back with Link to Hyrule. So that's why we have Tail as the fairy in Voyager of Time instead of Navi, because Navi never came back, which would mean, based on, again, the fanfiction part of this timeline, that fairy muncher did get a hold of her, unfortunately. So we know from just recently playing through Voyager of Time that Ganondorf somehow broke through the door of time, and everything just started going screwy because things, basically Ocarina of Time repeated itself, because of, this game was built off Ocarina of Time and only so much was changed, but Ganondorf escaped and had no memory of us whooping his ass once already. The only people that remembered the events of Ocarina of Time were Link and the sages. And as we kept on traveling back and forth through time, even Naboru, by the time we got to her, had started forgetting what had happened before. But at the end of that game, we did defeat Ganondorf again, and we sealed him in the Sacred Realm again. And all lived happily ever after. Just kidding. It seems like in the Legend of Zelda series, happily ever after is almost always only temporary. So now, I haven't started Zelda's Birthday yet. That's going to be our next one, like I said. I believe for the gameplay, we do have Navi back in Zelda's Birthday, so I have to make a little update to what I said happened in between Voyager of Time and Zelda's Birthday. So let's say that in between, where do I have it here? So let's say that Ganondorf was defeated at the, I didn't fix that yet. Okay, so let's say this. Let's say that something so absolutely horrific happens in between Zelda Voyager of Time and Zelda's Birthday that the Goddess of Time interferes or intervenes and, you know, pulls a couple of magical strings and, you know, undoes some of the damage that was done in Missing Link in Voyager of Time. Actually, you know what? I forgot. One cheap cop-out because I included Missing Link where Soraya is dead and then all of a sudden she's alive again in Voyager of Time. So let's just say, that's how I had it. Why do I not have that right in my notes? Alright, so second mistake. Bear with me. Haven't had enough caffeine today. So after the events of Majora's Mask, and we have that hypothetical second adventure in Termina, let's say something even worse than Majora's Mask came around. And let's say that everything got so screwed up that that's where the Goddess of Time had to intervene. And the intervention of the Goddess of Time and whatever magical strings she pulled to keep the whole world from going poof is how Soraya was magically brought back to life in Voyager of Time, and how Ganondorf was able to break the Door of Time because the Goddess of Time's power was weakened from interfering and preventing, you know, the end of all things. Let's do that. Let's say that hypothetical second adventure in Termina that's referenced in Voyager of Time was a potential cosmic apocalypse. Let's say that all of creation was going to be wiped out. And the Goddess of Time used a lot of power to keep that from happening, and, you know, that's how Soraya wound up being back alive, and that's how Ganondorf was able to break free of the Door of Time. That's like spur of the moment, I just made that up on the fly, but I think it works, we're going to go with it. Because if there's one thing about any series with a long-running lore, you know, there's going to be some cheap cop-outs in there somewhere, so I just threw one in of my own. Alright, so moving on. So, next game we're going to do is Zelda's Birthday, which I'm not going to spoil the story too much, but basically we're getting ready for Zelda's birthday, and, you know, some shenanigans happen, and, you know, we got to go deal with those shenanigans. So then we come down to Zelda. Again, one of the reasons for this new updated version 3 timeline is because of how many of these unofficial beta ROM games have been added in. So we have Master of Time, which is Link grows up after the events of Zelda's birthday. It starts kind of getting in his head that nobody really remembers any of his heroic deeds. So he starts wandering around looking for more people to help because he's got nothing else going on in his life. So he winds up in the land of Abello, and then that'll take us into the events of Legend of Zelda Master of Time. And then a relatively new unofficial beta project, Legend of Zelda Time Lost, I believe it is a direct sequel to Master of Time. And then I'm not going to really spoil too much about that one. I mean, I'm trying to keep this one somewhat spoiler-free, which I believe I did on the last two. I probably should have watched them and checked before I did this, but, you know, here we are. I didn't have as much time this weekend as I thought I was going to have, and I wanted to get this video out because, you know, it's been a little bit, again, and I'm trying to get back into the swing of things here. So, like I said, we're going to go from Zelda's birthday to Master of Time to Time Lost. And then we'll finally be back to, you know, regular Zelda games, per se, when we go into The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And I would imagine most of you are probably already familiar with the content of Twilight Princess, but basically we'll see Ganondorf come back, along with another disturbing yet entertaining sub-villain. And then, sometime after the events of Twilight Princess, let's see. So sometime after the events of Twilight Princess, Ganondorf will be reborn again because, you know, Demise's curse and all that. And some other stuff will happen, and we'll get taken into the events of Four Swords Adventures, where we'll have to deal with a returning Vadi and some form of Ganondorf, or Ganon. And that will take us into a couple more quote-unquote unofficial betas to finish off the child timeline. So let's see here. What did I have for this? Ah, yes. Alright, so Zelda, Legend of Zelda Perils of Darkness actually has Vaati as the main villain. So, the way I'm justifying having this in this timeline is that Vaati is reborn, which shouldn't be possible, but maybe because of his proximity to Ganon in Four Swords Adventures, he kinda taps into that whole demise curse recycle thing and is able to come back. The catch is he only has faint dreamlike memories of his past existence. But then, because of those dreams and memories, he figures that he needs to go and collect that magical Triforce he keeps thinking about to get his memories and stuff back. And so that'll take us into the events of the Perils of Darkness. So then, let's say after that, that the Ganon that was in Four Swords Adventures manages to come back and is defeated again. And it seems like, for a little while, that we're actually going to get a happy ending on this timeline. But we know damn well as Zelda fans that that happily ever after is always going to be temporary. So that takes us into the Parallel Worlds Link to the Past ROM hack, unofficial beta project, where... So, let's see, because I did do some research on this one to make sure that it was actually going to fit into this timeline. So, basically, in between Perils of Darkness and Parallel Worlds, the way I have it written based off what I read about the game is that a war breaks out for the Triforce, and very similar to what happened in Twilight Princess, those that were willing to, kill everybody else to get the Triforce wind up in a different dimension, because we have the Dark World, the Dark World and the Link to the Past, and that has to be incorporated into the new story. So the Dark World is just an alternate dimension where people who, again, were willing to kill their brothers and sisters for the Triforce wound up. And then maidens from that realm eventually come back into Hyrule, and they want the Triforce, which takes us into Parallel Worlds. And then, this part hasn't changed. Parallel Worlds is the last entry in the child timeline as of right now. So, Demise's curse recycles, Ganondorf is born anew, he is defeated, and his spirit is split into 4 fragments, and they are spread across time, and sealed in the Master Sword. Now, I write this at the end of each timeline so that I can justify basically that the events of Hyrule Warriors takes place at the end of all 3 timelines. And that's why I still have that labeled as the inevitable outcome of all 3 timelines. Alright, so that's what we can expect coming up, because I am playing through the whole child timeline before we move on. And then we're going to hop over to the adult timeline. So after Link is sent back to the past at the end of Ocarina of Time, it's been a little bit, so let me see, I believe it's like 100 years after the fact, Ganondorf still breaks free of the Sacred Realm, because that's just inevitable no matter what. So Ganondorf breaks free, and if you played Wind Waker, you know what happens after that. If you haven't played Wind Waker, we'll get to it eventually, because I'm going to get some hate for this, because a lot of people hated the cell shade style of the game. I think it was cell shade, but Wind Waker is one of my top Zelda games, and it always will be. I don't care how many other people hate it because of the art style. I loved Wind Waker. Wind Waker was fucking awesome. So, moving on. Again, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm putting mine out there. There's a 900-year gap in between Ganondorf's off-screen return to Hyrule and then the events of Wind Waker, so, again, if you know, you know. If not, you'll find out when we get to that game. And then, directly, taking place literally right after Wind Waker is the Phantom Hourglass, which involves, And then, some generations pass after Phantom Hourglass, which takes us into Spirit Tracks. And then, officially, in the official canon, that is where the future timeline ends. So, I had so many unofficial beta projects added into this that I kind of, forced a few of them over into the adult timeline, just because it got to the point where the child timeline and the abandoned timeline were going to have so many games, while the adult timeline just had these 3. So I kind of tried to like make this work with the fan fictioning so that it was at least somewhat evenly split. So after Spirit Tracks, let's say that, now see, it's hard to do this without spoiling certain things, so, you know, the spoiler tag is in the title for this timeline, but, you know, incoming spoiler. So if you played Spirit Tracks, you know that at the end of the game, Link and Zelda, you know, they're not happily ever after. Link is just off doing his own thing. So let's say with Hyrule at peace, Link decides he wants to go out and explore the world and see what's out there. So let's say Link ends up settling down in a different land, and then some generations later, some ancient evil awakens in that land, and Link's descendant Link has to go and, you know, take care of it. And that would be the events of the very short Zelda 64 Dawn and Dusk unofficial beta project. Now, I mentioned that I was going to find some excuse to play the unaltered Master Quest, or maybe the Ura Quest, and that's where I work this in. So let's say that after Dawn and Dusk, you know, everything just kind of moves along on its own for a little while, you know, nothing bad happens, and the fate of the original Hyrule Kingdom becomes legend. Now the problem is, when something, you know, when you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. So let's say that eventually, Ganondorf is reborn again through the curse of demise. And let's say that because people did not learn the ancient history of the old kingdom of Hyrule, that one way or another events played out in history that led us into Ocarina of Time repeating itself. Now again, this is kind of just an excuse for me to play the Master Quest or the Ura Quest and set the stage for the next few unofficial beta projects that I've shoved into this part of the timeline. So after the events of literally the rerun of Ocarina of Time, we come to Legend of Zelda: The Sealed Palace. Now, I had no idea where the hell I was going to stick this game in the overall timeline, and that's when I started thinking, hey, you know, we can greatly expand on the adult timeline, maybe do a little history loop, and get everything, you know, to fit over here. So with the Sealed Palace, let's say that Ganondorf is not able to escape the Door of Time this time around. Time this time around, that's funny. So let's say Ganondorf doesn't escape, but let's say he's able to use the Triforce of Power that he does take into the Sacred Realm with him to revive Twinrova, Komei, and Kotaki. And let's say that he hatches a plan with them, communicating across realms. And that takes us into the events of Legend of Zelda: The Sealed Palace. Now, another game that I was going to try to put in the child timeline, but the more I thought about it, it's just not going to fit, is The Ultimate Trial. So The Ultimate Trial is another unofficial beta, of course. All the unofficial beta stuff is in blue. Ultimate Trial is an interesting one because based on what I've seen and read of it, it's going to be a very interesting entry into our Zelda Let's Play series here. So, again, spoilers incoming. So the premise of Ultimate Trial is Link wakes up in this weird place with no idea what's going on, and again, spoiler. At the end of the Ultimate Trial, you find out that Link is dead, and he's trying to redeem his soul and gain access into basically heaven, as opposed to being stuck in purgatory for all time. So originally I was going to put the Ultimate Trial at the beginning of the abandoned timeline, because the canon story there is that Link died in that timeline fighting Ganondorf. So I thought, let's say that after Ganondorf is defeated at the end of Sealed Palace, he comes back, strangles Zelda, steps on her throat, whatever. He kills Zelda. He kills the sages, he kills Link, he kills everybody. Ganondorf kills everybody, gets the Triforce, and wins. and everybody lives sadly ever after. Well, at least the people who live. So you know, ultimate trial is that Link finding his way into heaven instead of having to live in purgatory, being punished for his failure. So we know that the spirit of the hero and the spirit of the goddess Hylia will always be reincarnated along with Demise. So eventually, a new hero is born, which takes us into Legend of Zelda: The Sands of Time. We could go as far to say that, you know, the Link in I mean, you could go as far to say that the Link in Dawn and Dusk had, you know, 2 kids, and then they went off and had kids, and one kid stayed in the land from that game, and one moved back into the Hyrule area. Like, you know, there's always room for speculation when you're talking about a timeline as convoluted as what the Zelda developers tried to put out there. So, not to mention I'm making it even more convoluted with all this fan fiction stuff. So, you know, there's plenty of room for interpretation here. But let's say that one of the descendants of that Link winds up coming back to Hyrule after Ganondorf has finally died of old age, and that takes us into the events of the Sands of Time. So I do now have the Sands of Time as the final entry in the adult timeline, because then we have, you know, the whole same thing as we have over here with the 4 fragments and blah blah blah. So now we go to the abandoned timeline. So let's say in this timeline that, you know, the same thing happened. You know, somehow, some way, Link ended up fighting Ganondorf. He lost. Takes us into the events of A Link to the Past, as is the original canon timeline way that things play out. So everything here more or less proceeds as it was always supposed to, based on the official timeline. We have the events of A Link to the Past. The Triforce sends Link to Holodrum and Labrynna in Seasons and Ages. Now, this is this is, I don't even remember how this was changed, but I literally ignored it because I thought it was stupid. Link's Awakening got moved around, and I think A Link Between Worlds got put in between the Oracle series and Link's Awakening, or something like that. Something here got changed after the original Hyrule Historia timeline publication, and I thought it was garbage, so I ignored it. Because this is my Zelda series Let's Play, and, you know, I can play it however I want. Obviously, again, you know, my opinion's not going to be everyone's opinion, and, you know, that's fine. That's the cool thing about opinions, is everybody is entitled to have one. So I'm keeping this as, oops, little brush of the keyboard there. So I'm keeping this as, we have A Link to the Past, the Oracle series, and then Link's Awakening is Link trying to get home from Labrynna or Holodrum, depending on the order you play these in. Because when you do the combined game on the Oracle series, it literally ends with Link hopping on the raft and sailing home. So yeah, Link's Awakening, and then Link eventually returns to Hyrule, and, you know, some generations pass, and then we come into A Link Between Worlds, which is where we, you know, see the Kingdom of Lorule and all that. I am trying to do minimal spoilers here. I'm trying to stick to only the spoilers that are basically required for me to justify this timeline. So let me see here. So the way I fanfiction this actually is that Demise's curse recycles after Link from Link's Awakening returns home and all that. Ganondorf does become Ganon again and is banished to Lorule and sealed away. And then some generations later, Yuga, you know, Lorule's version of Ganondorf, gets this crazy idea and puts it into action, and that's how we start A Link Between Worlds. Now, for Triforce Heroes, I have the Zelda and Link in Triforce Heroes being the same Zelda and Link from A Link Between Worlds. Like, I have Triforce Heroes happening within the same generation as A Link Between Worlds. And, you know, I've never played Triforce Heroes. I know a little bit about the story and what goes on, so that'll be cool when we get to it. And then comes the rhythm game, Cadence of Hyrule. Now, I do think there's a chance I'm going to try to play this game on this channel and just absolutely lose all patience because my sense of rhythm is abysmal. I mean, Melody of Memory when I was doing the Kingdom Hearts games was one thing, but I don't know how I'm going to fare with this game, so this may end up just getting taken out altogether. But let's say hypothetically that we do get through Cadence of Hyrule. The way I have this written is that it's still the Link and Zelda from A Link Between Worlds. We'll say this happens almost right after Triforce Heroes. So, spoiler, because I have read up on the story of the Cadence of Hyrule, just so I could see how I could make it fit in here. So, let's say that Octavo, or whatever his name is, as he's reading up on stories of the history and Ganon, and he's like having a little panic attack, so he comes up with this convoluted plan, and how did I have this written? Because this was a big change. So, the events of this game happen, and then after the events of this game, that's when things get a little messy. I mean, it always gets a little messy in Zelda, but so let's say that after the events of Cadence of Hyrule, that's where the whole thing with the king dying happens, and that Princess Zelda getting cursed with the eternal sleep by the wizard and inadvertently her own brother and all that. Ganondorf makes a big comeback after the events of Cadence of Hyrule. He gets a hold of the Triforce of Power, gets his, pig monster form back, and he disappears for a little while, or he's sealed away. But then, Zelda is stuck in her eternal sleep, and Link, gets old and dies and has to wait for a new Link to be reborn and all that. So we'll say all that happens, and then roughly 100 years after that, Ganon comes back. He breaks free of the seal, and that takes us into the events of the original Legend of Zelda, and then Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Alright, so this part here is going to be the same as the version 1 and 2. I have the Legend of Zelda Outlands, which is an unofficial beta of the original Legend of Zelda with a second quest that I actually worked into the overall story, because the way I have this is all of a sudden the Thunderbird that Link defeated towards the end of the Adventure of Link is revived, and yeah, so I don't know all the details of the Outlands because I haven't played that one yet either, but basically the Thunderbird comes back, steals the Triforce of Power and the special fairies that guarded it. So the Triforce is now, so then in the second quest, the way I'm writing this story, just based on what I know about the final boss of the second quest, again, spoilers, so we know the history of the old wizard that cursed Zelda and put her to sleep. So let's say that wizard somehow used his magic to, never die of old age. And the wizard was the one behind the Thunderbird being revived and stealing the Triforce of Power. And then when that fails, the wizard steals the Triforce himself, and Link has to go and get it. This is still the same Link now for the original Legend of Zelda, Adventure of Link, Outlands, and a short time after that, well, so 13 years after the Outlands events, Ganon is revived, and that same Link has to go ahead and take care of him yet again. Zelda 3: The Return of Ganon being another unofficial beta version of the original Legend of Zelda. I think it's some dungeon rearranging, maybe some world map changes, and stuff like that. So then we come to this one. So I'm putting Echoes of Wisdom at the end of this timeline. That's not where Nintendo says it is, but that's where I'm putting it. Because I think with the kingdom being expanded from So if you've played Echoes of Wisdom, you know that at first the map is strikingly similar to A Link to the Past. So we know it takes place in this timeline, we know it's that same Hyrule. So the way that I'm writing this is that after Ganondorf is destroyed at the end of the Return of Ganon, or the Adventure of Link, well, the original Legend of Zelda, if you're only following the traditional timeline. However we look at it, after Ganon is defeated, Hyrule does enjoy a long period of peace. Eventually Ganon does come back, and he is defeated, and then all the stuff that happens in Echoes of Wisdom happens. I really don't want to spoil anything about Echoes of Wisdom because the game is still, I mean, it's the newest game that's been released, unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't want to spoil anything about it right now because, you know, eventually I'll get to it. But, you know, right now, just in case anybody hasn't played it, I'm not dropping a single spoiler on this one. But the way I've written it into where I have it placed is, again, after Ganon is defeated, again, everything is peaceful, and then things become unpeaceful yet again, and we go into Echoes of Wisdom. And then, same thing. Oh, how'd that happen? So yeah, so again, same thing. So at the end of this timeline, it's the same thing, the inevitable outcome of all three timelines, which finally takes us into Hyrule Warriors. And then this is where I have another, like, cosmic apocalypse event happening. You know, Ganondorf breaks. So because of all the interference by the Goddess of Time and the constant effects of, like, you know, things happening across timelines, and we'll say the Demise's curse has some play in it as well. We'll say just like everything kind of comes together, and we are basically left with another cosmic apocalypse level event as Ganondorf breaks free. He travels through time, gathering all his allies, forms his own army, and finds a way to truly become Demise himself, instead of just being a reincarnation. So, yeah, I couldn't even imagine what would happen if this idea of mine actually got put into a game, but it would basically be Legend of Zelda meets God of War for the level of blood and violence that this would take to show. But I'm picturing something like, just, again, cosmic apocalypse level event. Ganondorf is, or the newly reborn Demise is defeated, and then, so again, I still have not played Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I am literally only going to play those games for the purposes of putting them on the channel, because to me, they're not really Zelda. And again, this is one of those cases where, you know, different opinions, everybody likes different things in their games. I don't like the fact that they took Zelda and turned it into more of a survival game, in my opinion, because you have to keep running around to pick up weapons, you've got to do all the cooking, like that's... I don't want to play a Zelda game like that. If I wanted to play a game like that, I'd go play a game like that. I'm gonna play it on the timeline on the channel eventually, because it is part of the Zelda series, but it's not really something I'm looking forward to right now. I'm sure once I actually get into the game and get a hold of it, I'll feel a little less bitchy about it, but it's... I don't know, I don't like that style of game, so it's going to be interesting to play through that one, because I am going to power through it when the time comes. I certainly can't guarantee 100% completion, but we'll get through the game. Anyway, so after all my fanfiction cataclysm happens, the timelines basically all just blend together, and, you know, that would eventually lead into the prehistory of Breath of the Wild, and then, of course, into the Breath of the Wild game. Now, funny enough, because Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is not supposed to be canon, it's supposed to be an alternate way of that timeline going before Breath of the Wild actually starts, is my understanding. I could be dead wrong about that, but from what I have seen across my research, we have Breath of the Wild, and the canon ending of Breath of the Wild goes into Tears of the Kingdom. But we have this branch where a little guardian travels through time into this other timeline, or travels back in time, or however we want to do it, and actually prevents Calamity Ganon from ever being fully unleashed, is my understanding. Again, I haven't played any of these 3 games yet, so this timeline right now is based entirely on speculation and a little bit of spoilers that I myself could not avoid. So again, that's why I say even with this version 3, this is all subject to change, and I'll probably talk about the lore in between each games as I start each new game. Anyway, so that's pretty much where we're at right now for my intended path through the rest of the Legend of Zelda series. There are all kinds of unofficial beta projects coming out for Zelda all the time. I am going to try my damnedest to avoid any temptation to add more games, because we have a lot of Zelda games to get through still, and there are other series that I want to do on this channel before I get old and my fingers stop working. So, the only other game that isn't on here yet that we know is coming is there's another Hyrule Warrior style game coming out that it's supposed to go alongside Tears of the Kingdom and show what Zelda was up to during the time that her and Link were separated. At least that's the last I read from the Nintendo Directs or whatever it was. So I haven't put that in here yet, but I mean, obviously it's going to go in there. We know it's going to be right here, again, occurring in tandem with Tears of the Kingdom. But, yeah, so... Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, I said I was going to keep this as short as I could, and I definitely did not keep that promise. But yeah, so that's where we are with the Zelda series right now. That's my intended way of going through the rest of the games. Just like with the version 1 and 2 timelines that I did, I will put the Google Docs Excel sheet link in the description. So if anybody wants to read through the lore the way I have it set up, if anybody, if you like it, say so. If you think something needs to be changed, say so. If you think I should leave a game out, I mean, I kind of have my mind made up at this point anyway. But I wouldn't mind a little bit of constructive feedback, because this is quite the convoluted timeline that I have thrown together here between the official and my fanfiction stuff. So, this was basically, I saw a lot of unofficial Zelda games that looked like they were really good, so I wanted to find a way to force them in so I could justify playing them as part of the timeline. And hell, I'm gonna try not to do any more of these timeline videos until we finish the entire series, and then we'll basically just do like one more little timeline video to see how right and wrong I had this figured out. And yeah. Alright, so I know that all 3 of these Zelda timeline videos now have been a little messy. I do remember that much, because it's a lot to cover, and I don't exactly sit down and do any rehearsals before I do stuff like this. This is all just on the fly with whatever little minimal cheat sheet and notes I decide to take beforehand. So hopefully I didn't make anyone's head explode with this crazy updated timeline theory / game agenda. Yeah, so moving on from this, I don't know what's going to happen next weekend, because I'm going to be out of town for WWE SummerSlam, so I don't think we'll have anything going on the channel next weekend again. But after that, so like the second weekend of August, we'll go ahead and get started with Zelda's birthday, and then we'll just keep on cruising from there. In the meantime, thank you all for watching. Hope everybody enjoyed this new timeline video, at least a little bit. Again, apologies for it being a little scatterbrained and extra convoluted, but such is the nature of the beast.